So today we're going to look at setting up hard drives and floppy drives. So we'll have a look at the documentation. This will tell you all what you need to know. The recommended way is to use a directory for your hard drives, which is also the easiest way to actually set this up. You can use actual hard drives, zip files, a actual hard disk file. They're all in there, so it's quite flexible, but it's best to use the actual directory structure unless you're using AMIGA OS 4.1, which are the newest OSs, modern day OSs, but it's sufficient for 3.1 to actually use a directory structure, and also a lot easier to actually maintain as well. So I'm going to just show you how to actually set these up. It's quite easy to do. So first of all, I'll show you actually what we need to actually set up. So if we go to your FS-UAE and hard drives directory, and we'll create 3 new folders in here. One is for our workbench 3.1, and I can name it workbench 3.1. And it's worth putting a space before 3.1 because when we load the disks up, it'll save confusion. I'm going to have one for programs and one for our games. So these will be 3 individual hard drives that we'll be using for our emulation. So let's have a look at FS-UAE and actually load these hard drives in. So I'm on the hard drives tab here, and we'll just, as you can see, locate our folder, and the first one we want in our first hard drive is workbench 3.1. Our second hard drive will be programs, and our third will be the actual games itself. So we're just browsing for them here and actually place them in. If we accidentally add the wrong folder, what you've got to do is actually hit this eject button on the end, and that will get rid of the folder that you've added. And it's really as simple as that to get those hard drives up and running. But remember, you've got to save your configuration, and that will be saved into the actual games config, the AMIGA configuration itself. So if we jump to the configuration file here in FS-UAE configs and open it up in the text editor, you can see that the hard drive 0, 1 and 2 have been added. So let's go back. You could add these in from different places. Let's have a look at the settings in here. This shouldn't have changed at all. No, this hasn't changed, so everything's actually held it within that config itself. Excuse me. Right, let's close this down a second. WHD load we don't have to worry about at the moment. I'll go into that at a later date. And if we hit start, what will happen is that you, instead of the actual disk come up, you'll get the AMIGA DOS, because now we've got a hard drive installed, but it hasn't actually got anything on there. So now we really need just to get workbench up and running on there. Hit F12, you can see that DFO is empty. These are your removable media. This is obviously your floppy drives. And I'll just exit out there using my arrow pad. So if we jump over to the floppy drives, we can actually put some floppies in here. So we increase the floppy count because we want all 4 floppy drives to actually be used. And what we need to do is download some ADF disks in here. So I'm going to actually download the workbench, and because it's going to be more than 4 floppies, we can actually place them into this media swap list. And this media swap list literally allows you to actually have a number of disks in there to actually choose from. So just a quick search for Workbench 2.1, 3.1. I mean, sorry, 3.1. Let's get this right. I wonder if I can find it. No. what I want is the site that I normally use. There we go, 3.1. And we can download them from here. And these are ADF disks. Stands for AMIGA disk format. And we want the AMIGA OS, so we want the install ADF, the workbench ADF, the locale, the storage, the fonts, and the extras. And we'll go into these once we install them on what they actually are. For the time being, we're just going to get these up and running. So that's all good, that's all we need. So let's come out of that. Now they've been downloaded, we've got to go and find them and place them into our Floppy's directory in our FS-UAE directory. So here they all are. So I'm just going to copy and paste these into my directory. Sorry, I forgot to put my key shower on to show you what shortcut keys I'm using. We could actually place them into a different directory and set up the FS-UAE to actually look at that directory, but it's best to actually use the standard directory that we normally use. So that's FS-UAE in Floppies, and we place them in there. So those are all in there now. And now we can actually start adding these. So these have already been injected, and what I'm going to do is add them to the media swap list down the bottom, because obviously we've got more than the actual number of drives available, and this will make them available to FS-UAE when we start running them. So I've added them in there, and now I'll add individual floppies into these floppy drives, and I'm just going to add 2 of them. So I'm going to add the workbench install in there, and also the workbench extras. Sorry, the workbench workbench disk itself. So there's the install in there as the first disk, and here's the actual workbench itself. So that's all good, those are in there. So I'm just going to start this now, and what that will do is actually start the actual emulator itself. And I've just made sure the screen is in a Windows state. You can do it full screen if you want. As you can see, the disk all loaded up, and we've got Workbench 3.1 at the top there, which is our disk. And remember, I placed a space in Workbench 3.1 to actually allow for us to distinguish what the hard drive is. And then if we go down to removable media, we can see the actual 2 disks in there. And if I hit enter on there, I can actually change those disks and eject them. So I've just ejected 3.1. As you can see, I've ejected the install disk, and it hasn't disappeared. And that's because that was the first disk that I booted from. I think it was the install disk. Even if I redraw all, you can see the disk doesn't disappear. So anything in DFO is booted from, but if you remove it, it will still stay visible on the desktop. Yeah, it was the install disk. So if we remove our workbench disk, what you'll see is workbench 3.1 without a space will actually disappear. So I hit eject, and that's disappeared now, because that wasn't the disk that we booted from. So that's good. We'll hit F12, and what I'm going to do is load a disk in, and I'm going to load the extras. No, actually, which ones? So you can see these are actually mirrored in here. So I can load the extra fonts, install, etc. I'll come out of here for a second, and we will jump over to this, something that's really annoying me, and that's the disk. You can hear that clicking in the background, and that's because it's the disk volume. So the empty disk volume, I'm going to set this to 0. So on the Amigas, when the actual disk was, there was nothing in the disk drives, you would have this click which was constantly polling the disk drive to see if there was a disk actually within. So now what you'll hear is once our disk has been loaded, you now don't get this annoying click. So that's all good. And we will just eject this disk, and as you can hear, it's all good. So we can't, the clicker's gone. So normally what you do for this, you'll get 4 clicks, which can be slightly annoying. And we just ejected those 2 disks, and as you can hear, nothing. So all good. So let's exit this. And what's the other settings? We've got settings of, we can set this to turbo. I'm going to show you this. It's best to set it to 800 because 1 in 10 gains will work. 1 in 10 gains won't work in turbo, and best for compatibility reasons to actually use 800. But I'm going to use turbo because sometimes you can get away with turbo for installing. It's basic experiment that you need to do. It normally is a problem when actually playing games rather than installing software. So if we eject, you can see that's virtually instantaneous now. So turbo really increases the speed. It's virtually instantaneous. So that's all good, he says. So we'll double click on the storage disk to actually just show you the contents, and here's the DOS drivers, and we'll get all into this when we actually install Workbench on the actual disk itself. So let's exit this. Come on, that's it. Remember, any changes you made, you will need to save them. So down here, hit the save. I haven't changed this back, so I'm going to change this back to 800 just in case I forget. And I think that's about it. In the next video, we'll actually talk about installing this on the actual hard drive itself.